welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about the books I want to read this autumn. I really like to read seasonally, and I like to make a list of kind of all the books I hope to read, and usually I don't get to them all, but I want to share some with you today. So it's going to be a little bit of TBR and a little bit of recommendations because some of them are rereads, so I know that I won't get to all of them, but I thought I'd share my full list because it might give you some ideas or maybe some inspiration for what you might want to read this autumn. So I really love to read, like I said, seasonally, and by that I kind of mean like I like to sort of read books that give me sort of like the atmosphere or like the coziness or the feeling of autumn. So either the setting is in autumn or the maybe some like witchy vibes or more fantasy or some mystery, some more spooky season vibes. So I'll show you what I've got, and I hope that you find something that you like. So grab yourself something warm and cozy to drink, or maybe a cozy blanket to snuggle up with, and let's get started. The first book that I have on my list is Nevermoor by Jessica Townsend. And this is a book that I heard about from Lexi over at Alexandra Roseland. I'll link her channel below. But she has great recommendations, especially for like spooky season and like middle grade. So this is a middle grade. And I only recently started getting into middle grade only because I really thought that, not that I was too old, but I never really thought about reading it. And then on her channel, she talked about how much she loved it. And so I was like, oh, you know, that sounds kind of fun. So I started, you can see my bookmark, I started reading this last fall, but then it started getting into Christmas time, and I wanted to save it to where I could really fully appreciate the, I don't know, the more fall vibes from it, I guess. I think she recommended to read it in the fall time maybe a year or two ago, and so, I don't know, I think I just wanted to save it for fall time. But it's about a girl named Morgan Crow, and she is cursed, and she's cursed to die, I believe, like on her 13th birthday, I believe. And anyways, she gets kind of rescued and gets sort of invited to be a part of a secret society, I believe, or tested to be a part of it. So it sounds super magical, and I mean, just the cover alone kind of made me wanted to read it. So Nevermoor by Jessica Townsend is one of the first things on my list to read this fall. And the other middle grade I have to read is also recommended to me by, well, not to me, but on Lexi's channel, and it's called The Girl Who Drank the Moon, and this is by, who is this by? Kelly Barnhill. So also the cover, again, super beautiful, but this one is, again, another middle grade. I just have the two middle grades on my list, but so this one is about a town that leaves a baby as an offering to the witch who lives in the forest, who terrorizes the town, and she actually is a really kind and gentle woman, a kind and gentle witch, and normally she rescues the children and then delivers them to families on the other side of the forest. But when this baby gets left, she accidentally feeds her moonlight, and so instead of I think I forget what she normally feeds her, or maybe it doesn't say, but instead of whatever normally happens to babies, in this particular case, she becomes a little bit magical. And so that sounds like a perfect story, a little witchy story, but like a kind witch. So that sounds just right up my alley. I'm not into something super scary, so this one sounds like a fun read, especially like in October, which is kind of like when I plan to read this one, more of like the spooky season, but not too spooky. And speaking of witches, this I've had for a really long time, but I don't know why I never feel like, I just never pick it up. And I think it's because it's kind of, I put it in a spot that's like not, I can't see it. So I put it in not the best spot to remind myself that I have this one, but it's a beautiful copy. It's Wicked. And so I'm sure you all have heard of the play Wicked. I actually have seen it on Broadway, and I loved it so much. And so I've never actually read the book. So I've had this for quite a long time. I think I've had it since high school, but I've never picked it up to read it. And as you can see, it's a really beautiful copy. So it's the kind of, if you haven't heard of Wicked, it's sort of like the other side to the story, or like the before part of the story of The Wizard of Oz. So it's the Wicked Witch. It's her story before Dorothy comes, or I think at least like part of it's before Dorothy comes. And so I think that would be a perfect witchy story for the autumn season. So Wicked by Gregory Maguire is another one on my list. Going on with the fantasy theme, I have a couple of rereads that are on my list, but I don't know if I'll get to all of them. This one I've actually already started. It's Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and this series I absolutely loved. I devoured it when I first read it. It's about a girl named Alina Starkov, and she thinks that she's like a less than average girl, but ends up she's a little bit more than that. And this is set in the Grishaverse or Grishaverse. I know that some people say Grisha. I always have said Grisha when I first started reading it, but to each their own, I suppose. But anyways, they have sort of, they call it the small science, and so it's fantasy in the fact that they have some, I guess, elevated abilities. So like some can maneuver with like wind or air, and some with fire, and some with kind of like the heart. So some can kind of manipulate people and then some other things. So I won't give too much away in case you haven't read it, but it's really good. I would highly recommend this series. Actually, most people would probably recommend Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which is the duology set technically after this trilogy. That's most people's favorite who have read these, and I would agree they're actually incredible. But I think these are just as good. I loved the getting to know more about Grisha and what their powers are and everything. So highly recommend this, and it's a really cool adventure. But I want to reread these because I actually got the next two books after Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. I actually got the next two for Christmas last year, but I kind of wanted to reread all of them again just because I enjoyed them so much, and I felt like this autumn season was a good time to read another little fantasy. So hopefully I can get through, that's what this stack is up here. Hopefully I can get through that whole stack before I kind of switch to Christmas, but we'll see. And then I have to always put Harry Potter on my TBRs for fall, especially, you know, I always try to watch them at fall time too, but especially I think it's is it the second one or the first one where they have the Halloween, like the big Halloween scene in the movies? I don't know. I think that's just especially fun to read this time of year, or to watch, especially at like Halloween time. But Harry Potter, I think it's a fun reread. It's really cozy to me, and I don't know. It's kind of a comfort read to me. So we'll see. I don't know if I'll read it because, of course, I have all these other books to read. But if I find myself needing something comforting and cozy to read, Harry Potter is pretty much like always on the list, especially this time of year. Okay, the next one was on my TBR, but I have already read it, so one checked off. But this is The Witch Haven by Sasha Peyton Smith, and I actually really would recommend this book. She's coming out with the second one, I think this October, so, or maybe it's out now. Witch Haven is about a girl who, again, believes that she's normal and average, maybe less than average, and something sort of tragic happens where she is kind of left sort of alone, like, in her life, and so she's leading kind of like a sad life, and then her boss tries to attack her, and something magical happens, and then she's whisked away to what she's told is an asylum to treat tuberculosis, but really it's a witch academy. And so it's all about her kind of getting acquainted with the academy and the people there, and then what the adventure after that ensues. So she has some decisions to make, and it's a really fun adventure. I think it's a little bit more dark than I was expecting, but in a good way. Like, it was not scary or like terrifying in any way. It was not horrific, but it was a little bit more dark and atmospheric than I was expecting, and I would highly recommend it, especially for like October. The next two are not rereads, but I don't have the next two books. So it's the Practical Magic series. So I don't have the Book of Magic or Magic Lessons, and so I'd like to get those two and read them. I read these two last October and highly recommend to read them at this time of year, but I I only sort of liked this one, but I really liked this one. The Rules of Magic. This one is so, like, gets really into, like, the history of the magic, and the three siblings, their dynamic is so good. If you've ever seen Practical Magic, the movie, that's what this one is, I guess, kind of based on this book. But I don't think I like this book because I love the movie so much, and I don't think that the characters were developed as well as they were in the movie, in my opinion. I did not love this book. I thought that the character development was lacking, and also I thought that some of the scenes that were like my favorite of the movie were just like not in here at all. So like if you've seen the movie Midnight Margaritas, like that scene is the best scene in the movie, hands down, and that's not even in here. Or like a bunch of the movie is set at the aunt's house, hardly set at all in the aunt's house in this book. So I think I was a little disappointed just because I had high expectations based on the movie. But this one, it was okay. I would highly recommend the movie though, because Practical Magic, it's like a staple fall movie in this house. So anyways, this one was okay, but this one, amazing. This one is about this one, I guess I can tell you a little bit what it's about. So this Practical Magic is about, there's two aunts. They're like older aunts, and they are witches, and so it's about them, and they're the Owens women. So the Owens have kind of like a curse where when they fall in love, their lover might die. And so anyways, this is actually about the aunts' nieces, Jillian and Sally. And so it's about their life and love. And this one is about the aunts, and so their names are Bridget and Frances, and so Franny and Jet, and their brother. So it's about the three of them in New York in the 60s. And so it's I think it's really cool. It's fun to see New York and like the magical side of New York. It's super atmospheric to me because, I don't know, it goes into detail about the streets of New York and the magic and the book that the brother finds that kind of teaches him kind of like above and beyond what the girls know. And like it kind of tests the limits of his magic a little bit, and so it's just really good. I really highly recommend this one. Even if you don't read this one, I don't necessarily think you need to read Practical Magic to read the Rules of Magic, and I would highly recommend this one. So those are Alice Hoffman's books, and then like I said, my plan is to read the Book of Magic and or Magic Lessons, which are the other two books that she has in this kind of like world or like storyline. So next we have The Bookshop on the Corner, and this is by Jenny Colgan, and she's a Scottish author, and this is a romance book, and I'm hoping / thinking that this is going to be sort of like a Hallmark movie in a book, and so that's why I picked this one. I just wanted something cozy and comforting, and this is about a woman who I believe she either quits or gets laid off from the job she does not like, and she decides to open up a bookshop, and I believe it's a mobile bookshop, so she goes from little town to little town and kind of, I think, makes an impact with her storytelling and with the books that she shares. And so I just think that sounds so good. I mean, anybody who loves to read, I feel like that's their dream life, like going from little cozy town to little cozy town sharing books. Like what more like really could you ask for? So, and of course it's Jenny Colgan, and she's a romance author, so I assume there's going to be a little bit of a romance in it as well. So I'm excited to read this one. This one is like one that I definitely will read this year. I'm too excited for this one. So the next one is I Must Betray You, and this one is not cozy. This is not a cozy read. This one is a historical fiction novel, and this is by Ruta Sepetys, and she is one of my very favorite authors of all time. I really love historical fiction because I kind of feel like I'm like learning something usually when I read her books, because she takes a not well-known part of history and then puts kind of like people to it. So sort of like the Titanic, where the Titanic is a true event, but like Rose and Jack were not real people. So it's like that. She sort of talks about a real event, has real history, real research that goes into her books, and then kind of builds a little story around it. And so her books are some of my very favorite books that I've ever read. I would highly recommend The Fountains of Silence. I think that was my favorite of her books, and that was the one she wrote before this one. This is her most recent, I Must Betray You, and I have not read it yet. I think I got it for Christmas, and I don't know what's taking me so long to read it because, of course, I just ranted about how much I love Ruta Sepetys. But this one is set, I believe, in Romania. I know it's set in Europe somewhere in the Romania, 1989. So you can see I've started it, but it's a little bit mysterious so far. Let me see if I can remember more about it. This one it's about a boy who kind of gets stuck because I think he at the beginning sort of is in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then he sort of has to become like a spy because he kind of like knows too much or knows something, so these people end up using him sort of like a spy, but then I think he doesn't know really what to do because, I don't know, I think he comes to sort of a crossroads where he has to make some really hard decisions about like whether he does the right thing for like the country or his family or something like that. So it should be really interesting, and it should be like pretty adventurous in some ways, I think. So I know it will be good because it's Ruta Sepetys, so I'm excited to read this one. I don't really like to know a lot going into those because I kind of like to learn as I go, so that's why this synopsis was a little bit lacking, but I just know it will be a good one because Ruta Sepetys. The next book is Anne of the Island, but I have to finish Anne of Avonlea first. This is the Anne of Green Gables series, so this is classic children's literature. The last little stack I have is all classics. So Anne of Avonlea is the second book in Anne of Green Gables, and I love Anne of Green Gables. I read it for the first time last autumn, and actually I read it on the plane going to and coming from Vermont, which I just felt like was the best place to read it because even though the first one is not like truly an autumn setting, it kind of goes throughout the whole year, so definitely had some autumn vibes, but it also definitely had some springtime vibes, so either one of those seasons would be perfect to read Anne of Green Gables. But I feel like if you are an atmospheric reader, or like if you like to kind of feel the most like get the most out of the season, or get the most out of like your reading experience and like really romanticize things, Anne of Green Gables is something I would highly recommend. So this is the second one, Anne of Avonlea, and this one has been really good so far. I'm about a little bit more than halfway through, and so I'd like to finish this and then read this one. From the cover, you can just like tell this is going to be so fallish, so that's why I would really like to read this one. I don't know what it's about. I don't want to ruin anything in this book, so I haven't really read the synopsis or anything, but the first one is about Anne, who comes to live at Green Gables with two people who she's not related to. She's an orphan, and she comes to really like become a part of their family, and it's all about the troubles that she gets into and her imagination, which is just so incredible, and it's kind of inspiring to me, just the way that she looks at things. So I would highly recommend Anne of Green Gables, and if you think it's like a classic and it would be kind of boring, it's not, especially if you read it from a perspective of like just a comforting little cozy time where it's not like a big adventure. You will really love it, I think. I have to finish Anne of Avonlea, and then Anne of the Island is on my TBR. That's the one that I actually have on the list to read, so hopefully I can get to those. And by the way, these are by L.M. Montgomery. Of course, I didn't say that because it's a classic, but you know, this time of year I feel like the quote, oh, I'm so glad I live in a world where there are Octobers, or something like that. That is an Anne of Green Gables quote, and I believe it's actually from the first book, so I think that's a great quote, and that it goes around so much this time of year. I feel like it's perfect to read. So anyways, the rest, like I said, are classics. I have two Agatha Christie's. One is Murder on the Orient Express. I'm getting too excited. And this one I actually have read before. I read it in high school, but it's been so long since I read it. I'd really like to read it again. I don't know, I think a train ride. This one just seems a little bit, not spooky, but I don't know. It's like, I think I want to read this when it's like raining or something. Like that'd be the perfect little cozy, cool, crisp, rainy evening. I don't know, I can really picture myself reading this on a rainy evening. But anyways, this one is about a mystery on a train. So that just sounds Octoberish to me. But anyways, I've read this before, so I know what it's about, and I kind of remember what happens, but I still think it'd be fun to read it again. And then the other one that I'd like to read is And Then There Were None. This is also by Agatha Christie, also a mystery, and I believe this one is about a group of people that were invited to an island, and one by one they begin to get murdered. And so I think it's about solving that mystery, and I know it's one of her most famous classic mystery novels, and so I'd really like to read this. This book actually has other, I believe, let's see, it has The Crooked House and Endless Night, but on my TBR is just And Then There Were None. So we'll see if I can get to it, but this is a really beautiful copy, and I think it'll be good. I think that'll be a cozy thing to read this season. So this one is more of a spooky read. And then the last thing, I have this complete copy of Sherlock Holmes. This is an old thrifted copy, but I read the first 1.5 stories, I think. Study in Scarlet is the first one. I only would partly maybe halfway recommend it. It was okay. The first one, A Study in Scarlet, is not my favorite of them, so I would say maybe you don't have to read them in order, so maybe don't read that one first. But I think the second one is so far really, really good. Sherlock Holmes, I think, is a super cozy mystery because, I don't know, it's not that scary to me, and so I don't really like scary, but I do like mystery, and so this will be a good read to kind of get into the classics a little bit. And even though the first one was not my favorite, I have high hopes for the other ones. I really enjoyed the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock series, so I sometimes like to find the similarities within the book to in the series, so that's fun. But anyways, my last TBR list item is any one of the Sherlock Holmes books or stories. Alright, cozy friends, and I think that's it. I think that was quite a long list, and I'll be really surprised if I can get through it all, but let me know in the comments what is on your fall TBR, if you like to read seasonally, or if you're just reading a book that you have been excited about. Let me know down below what you're reading now and what you hope to read this fall, because I love to share the ideas with each other and with myself. I always like to know new books to read, so let me know below, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Stay cozy!